It's been 24 hours since the first report of a zombie virus. Now, things are escalating quickly, but David Hale and Sarah Donovan will join me in just a moment to keep you all updated. Now, as a required disclaimer, everything you're about to hear is fictional and not based on real life, but we do ask you to immerse yourself into the broadcast. Before we hear from David and Sarah, comment where you're listening from and let me know if the zombies are in your area yet. Let's get started.
Scientists are warning about the potential resurgence of so-called zombie viruses, or viruses that can come back from the dead.
You are listening to What If News. I am David Hale, and this is our continued live coverage. If you are just joining us, I need to bring you up to speed quickly, and then we are going to move forward. 24 hours ago, a 31-year-old dock worker named Eamon Farrell walked out of a hospital bed at St. Columba's Hospital in Galway, Ireland, and bit a 7-year-old boy in the emergency waiting room. That was the first confirmed case of what is now being designated GV1, the Galway virus, a novel neurotropic paramyxovirus that attacks the brain's higher cognitive and social processing functions. In the 24 hours that followed, the outbreak spread from 3 neighborhoods in Galway to multiple districts of Dublin, crossed the Northern Ireland border, and produced at least 1 suspected case in Liverpool, England. As of the end of our last broadcast, confirmed infected stood at 214, with an estimated true count of between 800 and 2,000 people. 31 deaths, none from the virus directly, all from incident-related injuries. The Irish National Emergency was active. Military cordons were in place in Galway. Dublin was in what public health professionals call active management. We are now beginning our second day of coverage. I'm David Hale.
And I'm Sarah Donovan. We are live. It is now 25 hours and 12 minutes since Eamon Farrell's admission to St. Columba's. David and I have been at this desk for most of those hours, and we made a decision this morning, which is the same decision we made yesterday. We stay on the air. As long as there is something to report, we report it. As long as there is someone listening, we speak. You are listening. So here we are. I want to say one thing before we go into the news of the past hour, because I think it needs to be said at the top of this broadcast. The 24-hour reconstruction we gave you last night was a story about how fast things can change when something new arrives in a world that was not ready for it. The next 24 hours, the hours we are in right now, the hours we are going to walk through together in this broadcast, are a different kind of story. They are the story of what people do when they know, when they are no longer surprised, when the shock has passed and the decisions that actually determine outcomes have to be made. Those are harder decisions in some ways than the first ones. The first decisions are made in ignorance and chaos. These decisions are made in knowledge. The knowledge does not make them easier, but it makes us accountable to them in a different way.
In the past 60 minutes, the following significant developments have occurred, and I want to work through them in order of operational significance. First, the Liverpool case has been confirmed. At 4:47 this morning, the UK Health Security Agency formally designated a 44-year-old woman named Rosalind, a passenger on the morning Stena Line ferry from Dublin to Liverpool that departed before port closure, as a confirmed GV1 case. Rosalind was identified because her husband called the emergency line at 3 in the morning after she became unresponsive and then aggressive. She has been isolated. Her husband and their 2 teenage daughters are being assessed. The family lives in the Wavertree neighborhood of Liverpool. The UK government's immediate response was to expand the public health alert it had issued last night to a full national emergency declaration effective as of 40 minutes ago. That makes 2 countries, Ireland and the United Kingdom, operating under national emergency protocols simultaneously because of a virus that did not exist in any public health database 60 hours ago.
The second significant development in the past hour, the MV Haldorson, the container vessel that carried Eamon Farrell's likely exposure to the Galway docks. The Norwegian government working through the night in response to requests from Irish and WHO authorities, finally made contact with the Greenland outpost where the ship had loaded its cargo. I want to be careful and precise here because the details are both important and incomplete. Contact was established at 2:17 this morning via a satellite phone carried by a geological survey drone that was dispatched to the site after radio communication failed. The drone's camera feed and the satellite phone was inland. The two communicating staff members described the other 9 as having changed. They described being confined to a sealed section of the outpost. They described having been there for 16 days. The precise nature of what they witnessed and when it began is still being established, but the timeline is significant. If the outpost situation began 18 days ago and the MV Haldorsen departed the outpost approximately 15 days ago, the virus had been present at the point of origin for at least 3 days before the ship left. Whatever loaded onto that ship, the cargo, the containers, possibly the air itself in an enclosed hold, carried GV1 across the ocean.
That Greenland timeline gives us something we did not have at the end of the last broadcast, a point of origin. Not a perfect one, not a fully understood one, but a geographic and temporal anchor. The geological survey excursion that apparently returned 3 infected members of the outpost staff went into a deep rock formation 20 kilometers inland. Deep rock formations in Greenland's northern territory at the latitudes and depths described are consistent with ancient ice cores and permafrost systems that have been sealed from the surface atmosphere for potentially tens of thousands of years. The scientific community has been discussing for more than a decade the theoretical risk of ancient pathogens preserved in permafrost being exposed as Arctic temperatures rise and survey operations dig deeper. That discussion has been theoretical. It has been in papers and conference presentations and risk assessments. It has not, until this week, been in an emergency broadcast. I am not stating as confirmed fact that GV1 originated in ancient permafrost. I am stating that the timeline and geography are consistent with that hypothesis, and that the WHO's rapid response scientific team has placed that hypothesis at the top of its priority list for investigation.
I want to take a moment with the Greenland detail because I think it changes the emotional texture of this story in a way that deserves acknowledgement. If GV1 came from deep in the frozen earth, if it has been sealed in rock and ice for thousands or tens of thousands of years, waiting in the dark with no knowledge of us, no intent toward us, simply preserved, then the story we are living in is not a story about malice. It is not a story about error in the human sense, about a thing that was made or released deliberately or even negligently in the way we usually mean that word. It is a story about the earth being older and stranger than we account for in our daily arrangements. It is a story about the gap between the age of the planet and the age of our confidence in our understanding of it. That does not make what is happening less terrible, but it changes, I think, where the weight of it sits. The weight is not on a person who made a wrong decision. The weight is on all of us collectively for building a world that drills down into things we do not fully understand and sends ships across oceans before we know what they are carrying.
26 hours and 40 minutes since the original incident. A third significant development of the past 90 minutes, the Republic of Ireland's military cordon in Galway has been formally subdivided. Rather than a single perimeter around the 3 original affected neighborhoods, military command on the ground has established what they are calling a tiered zone structure. Zone 1, the innermost ring encompassing the streets directly around the original incident site at St. Columba's and the Salt Hill Promenade where Thomas attacked Aoife, is under the highest restriction level, with armed military personnel maintaining active perimeter control and no civilian movement permitted under any circumstances. Zone 2 surrounds Zone 1 and includes a broader buffer of residential streets where confirmed secondary infections were identified in the first 12 hours. Zone 2 permits limited movement by fully protective equipped medical and emergency personnel only. Zone 3 is the outer cordon, the ring that separates the outbreak zones from the rest of the city, where the goal is to prevent outward movement while allowing the carefully screened evacuation of confirmed uninfected residents through designated safe corridors. The logic of the tiered structure is sound. Its execution is another matter. Zone 3 in particular is a perimeter of approximately 19 kilometers around a dense residential urban area. 19 kilometers of perimeter maintained by military personnel who have been awake for 20 hours in the dark, in Irish winter weather, against a threat that does not announce itself, does not negotiate, and does not stop when told to stop.
We have been receiving listener messages throughout the night and into this morning, and I want to read a cluster of them because the voices from inside this are the part of the story that numbers and geography alone cannot carry. One from a man in the Zone 2 area of Galway. I have been in my house for 19 hours. My wife and I have not slept. We have 2 windows that face the street, and we have been watching in shifts. At about 2 in the morning, I saw a soldier, young, couldn't have been more than 20, stop at the end of our road and sit down on the curb for about 4 minutes, just sitting. Then he stood up and walked back to his post. I wanted to go out and give him a cup of tea. I couldn't, but I've been thinking about him ever since. Someone's child sitting on the curb in the dark, doing one of the hardest jobs that has ever existed. I wanted that noted. Another message from a woman in Dublin who identifies herself as a secondary school principal. I have 46 staff members, and I have been on my phone since yesterday afternoon trying to locate all of them and confirm they are safe. As of 40 minutes ago, I had heard from 43. I cannot reach 3. I don't know what that means. I am trying not to know what it means and to keep focusing on the 43. I don't know if that's the right approach. I don't know what the right approach is.
27 hours and 20 minutes in, I want to give an updated epidemiological picture because the numbers have moved significantly in the past 6 hours, and the movement tells a story that the public needs to understand clearly. Confirmed infected as of the Irish National Emergency Management Agency's 6 a.m. briefing, 408. That is a near doubling of the confirmed count from last night's 24-hour mark of 214. Estimated true infected per the epidemiological modeling team at University College Dublin, working in partnership with the WHO, between 2,800 and 4,600. The estimated range has widened, not narrowed since last night. This is not a failure of modeling. It is an honest reflection of the Houston Station dispersals branching patterns becoming increasingly difficult to track as second and third generation contacts are added to the tree. Deaths, 49, up from 31. Again, no deaths from the virus itself. All 49 deaths resulted from attacks, falls, secondary injuries during restraint or response. 49 people who were alive yesterday morning, who are not alive now, whose deaths are not the direct mechanism of the virus, but are as surely caused by it as if they were. I want that 49 to be as fully counted as any other number in this broadcast.
28 hours, a development I want to address directly because it has been generating significant traffic in the messages we are receiving and in the broader public conversation, and it deserves a straightforward response rather than being allowed to circulate without comment. In the past 3 hours, a substantial amount of social media content has been circulating claiming that GV1 does not exist, that the government response is a coordinated effort to impose emergency powers for other political purposes, and that the footage and reports from Galway and Dublin are fabricated. I am going to say this once clearly and not return to it. GV1 is real. The virus has been sequenced by 4 independent laboratories in 3 countries. The genomic data is publicly available and has been reviewed by hundreds of independent virologists in the hours since its publication. The outbreak is real. The deaths are real. 49 people have died. The infected are real. The people living in cordoned neighborhoods and locked apartments are real. I understand the psychological mechanism that produces conspiracy thinking in moments of crisis. When reality is genuinely terrifying, the brain sometimes finds it easier to reach for an alternative explanation that at least locates the terror in human agency in something that could theoretically be stopped or resisted. I understand that mechanism. it does not make the content it produces true. It makes it dangerous because people who believe the outbreak is not real do not take protective measures, and people who do not take protective measures become part of the chain.
29 hours and 50 minutes. The UK situation is developing with the speed that those of us who watched the Irish situation develop 24 hours earlier feared it would. The confirmed Liverpool case, Rosalind in Wavertree, has produced in the 6 hours since her identification a contact tracing exercise that has established at minimum 11 additional exposure events. She was on the Dublin ferry for 4.5 hours. She then took a taxi from the Liverpool ferry terminal to her home. She stopped at a petrol station. She went into a supermarket. She was symptomatic or close to symptomatic for at least 2 of those hours, though her husband reported that she seemed tired and a bit irritable, and he attributed it to the travel. The taxi driver has been identified and is being assessed. The petrol station has been closed and its CCTV reviewed. The supermarket, a large Tesco in the Wavertree Retail Park, had approximately 90 customers and 12 staff members during the window when Rosalind was present. All of them are being sought. Some have been reached, many have not. The UK Health Security Agency has issued an alert specifically for anyone who was at that Tesco between 11:45 and 12:30 yesterday morning. The alert has been seen by millions of people. It has reached, in terms of pure information delivery, most of the people it needed to reach. Whether those people take the action the alert asks them to take, go to a designated assessment center, report household contacts, monitor for symptoms, is a different question. And the answer to it will determine whether Liverpool looks like Dublin or like Galway in 48 hours.
30 hours in. I want to talk about something that has not received adequate attention in the coverage of this outbreak, and that I think is one of the most important parts of the story. I want to talk about the people who are working, not the frontline responders, though they deserve every word that has been said about them and more. I want to talk about the people in the background, the epidemiologists who have not slept, the laboratory scientists running sequences for the 16th consecutive hour, the emergency management coordinators who are on the phone simultaneously to military commanders, hospital administrators, government ministers, and international health agencies, holding all of those threads at once. The public health nurses, like Dr. Siobhan Murtagh, who identified the pattern yesterday morning, who are still at their posts, still reading logs, still looking for the patterns that the systems were not designed to surface, because in a situation like this, the systems are always behind, and the people who see what the systems miss are the ones who change outcomes. These people are not visible in the way that soldiers at a cordon are visible. They are in offices and laboratories and on phones, but the outcome of this outbreak, the degree to which it is contained or not, the degree to which it kills or not, will be determined at least as much by them as by anyone with a weapon or a barrier.
31 hours and 20 minutes. A new and significant piece of scientific information has been released by the WHO Rapid Response Team in the past 30 minutes, and I want to walk through it carefully because it is both encouraging and complicated. The team, working with samples from multiple confirmed cases, has identified what they are describing as a potential environmental vulnerability in GV1, meaning a condition under which the virus does not survive transmission effectively. Preliminary findings suggest that GV1 is significantly less stable at temperatures below 4 degrees Celsius, and that its viability in aerosol form, the droplet transmission mechanism, degrades substantially in cold, dry air. This is preliminary, this is in vitro, meaning in a laboratory setting, not a clinical or real-world transmission study. But if it holds up, it has direct practical implications. The virus may be less transmissible in cold outdoor environments than in warm indoor ones. It may struggle to survive in the kind of winter air that currently characterizes a November night in Galway or Liverpool. This does not mean going outside is safe. It absolutely does not mean that. The transmission through direct bite direct fluid to wound contact is confirmed and is not temperature dependent in the same way, but it may mean that the vector of transmission in enclosed warm spaces, homes, hospitals, vehicles, waiting rooms, is more dangerous than outdoor transmission, and that ventilation and air temperature management in indoor spaces matters more than had been assumed.
The practical implication of that finding, if it holds, is significant, and I want to spell it out for our listeners because I think it changes the guidance slightly, and the change matters. The current advice issued by both the Irish and UK governments is to stay indoors. That advice is still correct in its fundamental orientation. Going outside in an affected area and encountering infected individuals is enormously dangerous. But the additional note, which the WHO Rapid Response Team is now recommending be incorporated into public guidance, is open your windows. If you are sheltering in place, if you have sealed your home, and you are waiting out the outbreak, the evidence suggests that cold air moving through your space may be protective against aerosol transmission. Open the windows, keep the temperature down. The virus, if the preliminary findings hold, does not like the cold. This is the first piece of information since the outbreak began that gives a protective action beyond staying still and waiting. It is small, it is preliminary, but it is something.
32 hours. I want to address the question that has been raised by several public health commentators in the past few hours, and that deserves an honest answer rather than evasion. The question is, was the 5-day delay between the WHO's receipt of the Irish government's emergency notification and the public's knowledge of the outbreak, was that delay the right decision? I have been thinking about this carefully, and I want to give you my honest assessment. The delay was not 5 days. Let me be precise. The WHO received the Irish notification at 9:47 yesterday morning. The public alert was issued by the Irish government at 2:15 in the afternoon of the same day, approximately 4.5 hours after the WHO was notified. There was no 5-day delay in public alerting. The 5-day figure that has been circulating refers to the time between the Greenland outpost's last radio contact, which the Norwegian survey company attributed to equipment failure, and the dispatch of the drone that finally made contact this morning. That is a different failure, and it is a real one, but it is not a government suppression of information about GV1. I want to be precise about this because in an environment where disinformation is already circulating and where public trust in official information is the single most important infrastructure protecting people's safety right now, inaccurate framing of the timeline is not neutral. It has consequences.
33 hours and 15 minutes. More messages. I am going to keep reading them because they are the map of what this is like from inside it. One from a paramedic in Dublin sent at 3 in the morning. I have been on shift for 21 hours. I have responded to 17 incidents today. I want to say to anyone listening who is sheltering in place and is afraid and is holding on, you are doing the right thing. Every person who stays inside is a person we don't have to respond to. You are helping us by staying still. I know it doesn't feel like doing something. It is doing something. It is doing the most important thing. Another from a retired school teacher in Galway who identifies herself as being in Zone 2. I am 74 years old. I have lived in this city my entire life. I know every street in the cordon by name. I know people on most of those streets. I have been calling my neighbors on the phone every 2 hours through the night to check on them. So far, everyone has answered. I am going to keep calling until everyone answers or until this is over, whichever comes first. Another message from someone who does not give their name or location. My brother was one of the first people infected in Galway. I knew something was wrong before the alerts came out. He called me at about 11 yesterday morning, and he sounded different. I can't explain how. He just sounded like the words were right, but something underneath them wasn't. I told him to rest. I should have said something else. I don't know what I should have said. I don't know if it would have mattered, but I keep thinking about that call.
34 hours and 40 minutes. I want to give an update on Eamon Farrell, the first confirmed case, because his medical situation has developed in ways that the scientific team considers significant. Farrell remains in isolation at St. Columba's Hospital. He is alive. He is, as far as the medical team observing him can assess, physically stable. His body systems are functioning. He is not improving. He is not deteriorating in any gross physical sense. He does not speak. He does not respond to visual or verbal stimuli in any consistent way. He does not appear to be in distress. He sleeps in irregular intervals. When awake, he sits or stands, moving rarely, apparently without purpose. The neurological team monitoring him has, in the past 24 hours, conducted extensive imaging and analysis of his brain activity. The results, shared with the WHO Rapid Response Team and published in summary form this morning, describe a pattern of neural activity that the lead neurologist characterizes as unlike any condition in existing clinical literature. The higher cortical regions of the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, the regions associated with social cognition, executive function, and moral reasoning, show dramatically reduced activity, not absent, reduced. The limbic system and the motor cortex, the regions governing physical movement, sensory processing, and the fight or flight response, show activity within normal ranges and in some measures slightly elevated. The neurologist's summary notes: the patient's brain is functioning. The functioning is organized in a way that is fundamentally different from baseline human neurology. The question of whether there is subjective experience occurring within that organization and whether there is something it is like to be Eamon Farrell right now is one that we cannot currently answer.
Whether there is something it is like to be Eamon Farrell right now. I have been sitting with that sentence since David read it to me 20 minutes ago. It is the most important question, that question, in the entire science of this outbreak. We talk about the infected as though they are a category, a population, a number, 408 confirmed, 2,000 to 4,600 estimated. We talk about what they do and what they no longer do, how they move and how they must be managed. We do not talk very often about whether they are experiencing something, whether there is a person still inside the changed body, unable to express itself in the ways we recognize as personhood, but present, aware. The nurse who sent us the message last night, the one who sat with Eamon Farrell before he changed, who held his hand, who brought him water, she said she thought about who he was before. I want to suggest gently that the question of who he is now is not yet closed.
36 hours. We are at the 1.5 day mark, and I want to pause for a structural update on the international response because the machinery of global crisis management has been moving through the night and the morning, and the picture now is meaningfully different from the picture at this time yesterday. The World Health Organization has formally declared a public health emergency of international concern, the highest formal designation in its toolkit, the same designation used for the most serious global health events of the past several decades. This declaration activates a set of international legal obligations on member states. Mandatory reporting of cases, mandatory cooperation with WHO investigation teams, mandatory implementation of recommended containment measures. It does not compel any specific military or civil response. That remains the prerogative of national governments. But it creates a framework of accountability and coordination that in practice significantly shapes what governments do. 15 governments in the hours since the PHEIC declaration have issued enhanced border screening protocols or partial border closures. Air travel from Ireland and the United Kingdom is now suspended or restricted by 23 countries. The EU has activated its Health Security Committee in emergency mode. The G7 leaders held an emergency virtual call at 4 in the morning, their respective local times. The joint statement from that call is being released in segments as individual leaders' offices finalize translations, but the key commitment, joint scientific cooperation, shared resource mobilization, coordinated border management, has already been communicated publicly.
37 hours and 30 minutes. I want to take a moment to talk about the children in this situation because they have been present throughout this story, and I do not think they have been centered in the way they deserve. Kieran, the 7-year-old who was bitten in the waiting room at St. Columba's on the very first day, is in isolation in the pediatric ward of University Hospital Galway. His mother has not been allowed to be with him because his infection status means a sealed room, and his mother is not infected, and those two facts cannot both be true in the same space. His mother is in a waiting area 20 meters away. She has been there for 21 hours. A social worker has been with her through the night. I am told she has not slept. I am told she is asked approximately every 2 hours for any update the medical team can give her. I am told the medical team gives her every update there is to give, which at this stage is he is stable, he is physically comfortable, we are monitoring him closely. We do not yet know what recovery looks like for GV1 because we have never seen GV1 before. What we are learning from Kieran's case, and this is scientific information that the medical team has flagged as potentially significant, is that the progression of the infection in a 7-year-old child appears so far to be slower than in adults. He is symptomatic, but at a lower severity than the adult cases at equivalent time post-infection. This may reflect developmental neurology, it may reflect immune factors. It is a thread the research team is pulling urgently.
38 hours and 50 minutes. The Dublin situation, I want to give a full account because Dublin is now the most complex operational theater in this outbreak, and it is the one most likely to determine whether GV1 remains a national emergency or becomes something larger. Dublin's population is approximately 1.4 million people in the greater metropolitan area. Of those, the emergency management team estimates that approximately 1.1 million are currently sheltering in place, meaning they have received the guidance, they are following it, they are inside, they are protected to the extent that being inside and not encountering the infected is protective. That is a remarkable compliance rate for a major European city in a sudden emergency, and it speaks to the seriousness with which people received last night's full national emergency declaration. 300,000 people, by the estimate, are either not sheltering in place by choice, unable to shelter in place due to homelessness or circumstances, or in locations, hospitals, care homes, emergency services, where their work requires them to be operational. Those 300,000 people represent both the greatest operational challenge and, in the case of the essential workers among them, the backbone of the response. The active outbreak zones within Dublin are currently identified as 4 concentrated clusters: the area around Heuston Station where Aoife arrived, the Rathmines and Ranelagh neighborhoods where several of the train's passengers lived, the Docklands area where secondary spread from an unidentified early case is suspected, and a 4th cluster in Ballymun in the north of the city, whose origin is still being traced. 4 clusters in a city of 1.4 million. That is both a manageable number of origins and an enormous number of potential connections, because a city of 1.4 million people has a network of social and movement connections that makes Galway's 19-kilometer cordon look geometrically simple.
39 hours and 40 minutes. I want to read a message that came in an hour ago and that I have been thinking about since I first read it, because I think it asks a question that is going to become more important as this story continues. The message reads, I am a doctor. I am not going to say where I am working because I don't want to cause alarm about a specific facility. I want to ask a question that I think the public should be asking. What is the plan for recovery, not just containment? I understand the containment plan. What is the plan for the people who are infected and are currently being held in isolation or managed in the field? When the active spread is controlled, if the active spread is controlled, what do we do with the people who have GV1? Is there a treatment pathway? Is there a model for what recovery might look like? Is anyone working on that specific question? Because in all of the briefings I am receiving, the language is about containment and management and perimeter. I am not hearing anyone talk about what we do for the people inside the perimeter. They are patients. They deserve a plan. That is from a working doctor in the middle of this, and I think it is one of the most important questions that has been asked in the 40 hours since this began.
That question from the doctor in the field deserves a direct answer, and I want to give it as completely as I can based on current information. There are 3 research threads specifically focused on treatment and recovery that the WHO Rapid Response Team has confirmed are active. First, the neurological team observing Eamon Farrell and several other early infected patients has noted that in a small number of cases, currently 3 out of the 48 long-term observation patients, there is intermittent partial recovery of responsiveness. Brief windows, some lasting only seconds, some lasting several minutes, where the patient appears to respond to their name, to make eye contact, to exhibit what clinicians are cautiously calling recognition behaviors. These windows are unpredictable, they are not sustained, and they do not represent functional recovery. But they suggest that the neural architecture underlying social cognition has not been permanently destroyed. It has been suppressed. Suppressed is different from destroyed in terms of potential reversibility. Second, a pharmacological team at Trinity College Dublin has been working through the night on candidate compounds that interact with the specific neural pathways GV1 appears to target. They have identified 17 candidate compounds for preliminary screening. This is early stage work measured in days, not weeks. Third, the slow progression finding from Sharon's pediatric case is being analyzed for what it might reveal about factors that modulate viral impact on neural function. If age or immune factors slow progression, those factors might be leveraged therapeutically. The plan is being built. It does not yet have answers. But the doctor asking whether anyone is working on it deserves to know, yes, people are working on it right now.
41 hours. I want to step back from the operational picture for a moment and say something about what it has been like to sit in this chair for 41 hours and watch this story develop from its very beginning. When Eamon Farrell was admitted to St. Columba's yesterday morning, this was a routine hospital incident report. Not even that, and it was below the threshold of a routine report. It was a note in a log. By the end of that day, it was a national emergency in 2 countries. Now it is an internationally declared public health emergency of international concern with G7 engagement and WHO mobilization and military cordons, and a question about what it means to have a subjective experience inside a changed brain. The velocity of that transformation from a note in a log to this in 41 hours is something I have been struggling to hold in my mind, because I think understanding the velocity is essential to understanding what comes next. Things that move this fast do not slow down on their own. They slow down because of deliberate, sustained, coordinated intervention. The intervention is happening, but the speed of the thing it is trying to slow is real, and honesty requires saying so.
42 hours and 30 minutes. A significant development in the scientific picture that I want to address carefully and completely. The WHO Rapid Response Team has in the past 2 hours released an updated transmission profile for GV1 that revises upward the estimated transmission efficiency of bite to infection conversion. Initial estimates, based on the first 48 cases, put the probability of infection following a bite wound at approximately 60 to 70%, meaning not every bite produces a new case, which was considered modestly encouraging. The revised estimate, based on a larger case set now including over 300 confirmed bite exposures, puts the probability at 82%. That is a significant upward revision. The difference between 60% and 82% at the scale of an active outbreak with hundreds of bite events occurring per day is enormous in terms of projected spread. The WHO has characterized this revision as consistent with the observed acceleration in case counts. In other words, the math of the outbreak that we have been watching unfold is now better explained by the higher transmission figure. What the revised figure changes operationally is the strictness required in protective measures. At 60%, some informal approaches, opening a door slightly, attempting to restrain a household member, brief exposures, carry a risk that might be considered manageable in the absence of alternatives. At 82%, those same approaches carry a risk that is not manageable. The guidance is clear and has not changed. Do not engage with infected individuals. Do not attempt restraint. Call emergency services. That guidance is more urgent now than it was when it was first issued.
43 hours and 50 minutes messages. I am going to keep reading them, and I'm going to keep reading them for as long as this broadcast runs. One from a woman in Liverpool. I went to that Tesco. I was there on Tuesday morning. I didn't know. I had no idea. I have been at an assessment center since this morning. I am in a waiting room. There are about 40 other people here. Some of them are frightened. Some of them seem calm. One woman has been knitting since I got here. I find the knitting extraordinarily calming to watch. We do not know each other. We are sitting here together not knowing, and somehow we are all being quite decent about it. I thought that was worth noting. Another message from a man who identifies himself as a Garda superintendent in Dublin. I want to address the people who have been saying online that we are using excessive force. Every officer I have deployed has been instructed that the infected are not criminals and are not to be treated as criminals. They are patients, they are ill. Every action taken is the minimum necessary to protect other people from harm. I know how some of what has happened looks on camera. I know it is disturbing to see. I want you to know that the men and women doing this work are doing it with care and with grief. None of them went into this job for this. Every one of them is doing it because it must be done and because they are the ones who can
45 hours and 20 minutes, I want to give the updated global picture of where GV1 has reached or is suspected to have reached as of this morning's briefings. Confirmed cases in Ireland, 612, with an estimated true count of between 4,000 and 7,000. Confirmed case in the United Kingdom, 1 confirmed case in Liverpool, 12 probable cases being assessed. And in the past hour, a report from Glasgow, Scotland, of a possible case of a passenger who traveled on a Ryanair flight from Dublin to Glasgow that departed before air travel suspension. That flight has not yet been confirmed as a transmission event, but is being treated as a priority investigation. Suspected cases or precautionary assessment situations elsewhere, 1 each in France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Spain, all attributed to travel connections from Ireland or the UK in the window before travel suspensions. None of these have been confirmed. All are being assessed with urgency. The WHO's assessment, released at 5 this morning, states GV1 has demonstrated transmission from its point of origin to multiple countries through normal pre-suspension travel channels. The full extent of this pre-suspension seeding cannot yet be determined. Member states are advised to treat all individuals presenting with sudden behavioral change or unexplained neurological symptoms as potential GV1 cases until assessed otherwise.
46 hours and 40 minutes. I want to return to the question that the doctor asked us, the question about the people inside the perimeter, about recovery, about what we do for the infected rather than just managing around them, because I have been thinking about it since I read it, and I want to think about it out loud for a moment, because I think it points to something that is going to matter enormously in the days and weeks ahead. The infected are not gone. Eamon Farrell is not gone. He is in a room in Galway, and he breathes and he sleeps in irregular intervals, and there are 3 brief windows in 48 patients where something that looked like recognition appeared for a few seconds. Ciaran is in a sealed room with his mother 20 meters away, and he is progressing more slowly than the adult cases, and that slowness means something to the research team. Tomas's wife is in isolation. Bridget, the nurse who went home after her shift and was bitten by Farrell, is in isolation at the same hospital where she worked for 11 years. These are specific people. They have names and histories and people who love them and who are 20 meters away or in zone 2 or on the phone every 2 hours asking for updates. The plan for them is not just a scientific question, it is a human obligation. And I want to make sure in the hours and days ahead that the urgency of that obligation stays as visible as the urgency of the containment effort.
48 hours, 2 full days since Eamon Farrell walked into St. Columba's Hospital in Galway, Ireland. I want to give the final accounting of this broadcast, clear, complete, honest, and then I want to say what I believe comes next. Confirmed infected globally, 641. Estimated true infected globally, 4,000 to 8,000. Deaths, 67. Countries with confirmed or probable cases, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and one confirmed travel-linked case each in France and the Netherlands. Countries on precautionary elevated alert 23. Active military cordons, Galway, 3-tiered structure holding, Dublin. 4 identified clusters under active management, 300,000 shelter-in-place non-compliant individuals, infrastructure operational. The WHO PHEIC declaration is active. The G7 has committed to coordinated response. The Norwegian government has dispatched an emergency rescue team to the Greenland outpost. The genomic sequence of GV1 is publicly available and being studied by virologists on every continent. 3 pharmacological research threads are active at Trinity College, Dublin. The CRN Pediatric slow progression finding is being investigated. The 3 intermittent recovery cases among 48 long-term observation patients are being analyzed for therapeutic implications. The environmental cold temperature vulnerability finding is preliminary, but is being fast-tracked to clinical assessment. The outbreak is 48 hours old. It is not contained. It is not uncontained. It is in the place between those two things where the outcome is still being written, where the decision's being made in the next 24 hours by scientists, by soldiers, by governments, by ordinary people, deciding whether to open their window or answer the phone or stay inside one more hour. All of those decisions still matter. The outcome is not fixed. It is in motion. We are in motion with it.
I want to close this broadcast with something I have been holding since we came on the air this morning. Yesterday, at the end of our first broadcast, a nurse at St. Columba's sent us a message about Eamon Farrell, the 31-year-old man at the beginning of all of this, the first person the virus found, who held her hand and said thank you for a glass of water. That message was the last thing we read before we signed off. In the past hour, the same nurse, she did not identify herself by name again, but the details are consistent, sent us another message. This is what it says. I went back to his room this morning. I don't know why. I just went. He was sitting up, which he does sometimes, staring at the wall. And I said his name. I said Eamon, like I always used to when I came into his room and he was a new patient and I wanted him to know someone knew who he was. And he didn't turn. He didn't respond the way he never responds. And I've been trying to decide whether to send this because I don't want to give anyone false hope and I don't want to be the nurse who saw something that wasn't there. But his hand, the hand that held mine on the first day, it moved just slightly, just the fingers, like the beginning of a reach, and then it stopped. And I don't know what it means. I don't know if it means anything, but I went back and I said his name and his hand moved and I wanted someone to know that. His hand moved. We do not know what it means. We do not know if it means anything, but we are going to keep watching. We are going to keep coming back to say his name. From What If News, I am Sarah Donovan.
And I am David Hale, 48 hours in. The story is not over. We will be back. Stay inside. Keep your windows open. Say the names of the people you love.